crazy story for you today. It's published by True North in Juno News by Melanie Bennet. I just got to read you this headline, and then we'll talk to Melanie in a second. The headline is exclusive. New ethics code tells nurses to denounce white European medicine. The Canadian Nurses Association 2025 Code of Ethics of Nurses denounces what it calls the white European-centric foundations of modern medicine. Now, everybody knows that my health regime, which gives you this impressive physical specimen in front of you, relies on traditional methods, including a little bit of voodoo and eating my feelings. Apparently, that is superior to Western European medicine. I'm joking around. Joining me now is Melanie Bennet. Hey, great to see you. Is this published? Like this isn't a draft or a discussion document, is it? This is the real deal?
Yes, this was released mid to late last week, so it's brand new. Probably many nurses haven't even read it yet. It is published. This is the document. It's very, very activist orientated. When I read it, I was quite surprised because what I wanted to know is if this activist element was new for 2025 or whether it was always there. It's just a sort of a new iteration of this sort of progressive leftist language. And I was advised that no, it's pretty new.
You know, I made some dumb jokes about voodoo and things like that, but it is one of the great developments of civilization that we have extended life expectancy, which used to be, for the vast majority of humankind, you know, you'd be lucky to live to 30. And I mean, just think of life without modern dentistry. I mean, I don't care if it's Eurocentric or where it's from, there is an objective scientific medicine. Now, I think that was stressed out during the pandemic when we were given politicized medicine. But I think on the whole, everyone would acknowledge that scientific medicine is what we want. And the race of any researcher who discovered penicillin or the race of people who discovered insulin, it's irrelevant. But the nurses think that's quite important, don't they?
Well, certainly the Canadian Nurses Association think it's very important. They specifically call or point to truth and reconciliation as the reason that they're taking this approach. So they have, the document has values, you know, a certain set of sections called values. And one of those sections is called promoting social justice. And another whole section is about Indigenous ways of knowing and so on and so forth. And my understanding is that this is new in 2025. So I'll give you an example furthering this Indigenous ways of knowing. In another section, it says that systemic changes to health institutions on the importance of integrating Indigenous knowledge into clinical practice. So they're saying we need to start incorporating Indigenous knowledge into the clinical care that you would receive from a nurse. Like that would be their ethical duty to do that. And also to integrate it into research, what they call Indigenous perspectives and within research. So I don't know, they don't really provide a lot of detail. They're just saying that this has to be done for truth and reconciliation.
Yeah, I don't even understand it. I have your essay here, and I would encourage anyone to go to junonews.com to check it out. You show an image from the actual guide. Let me just read paragraph 5.3.4. Sounds like there's hundreds of little political nudges. Yeah. This one says, that nurses promote planetary health. You know, I'm more interested in my own health than planetary health, thank you very little, as essential to the global health and well-being of all living and non-living elements of nature. How can you have health for non-living elements? I don't know if that, I think health sort of, we use the phrase biological sciences to mean life. I don't know how you, like, what is the well-being of a rock?
Well, curiously, I didn't see all that much about gender and gender identity in there, other than saying that you must affirm and respect gender identity. But there was a lot about this planetary health, this interconnectedness of things. And what really struck me, like you just mentioned, is the respect for living, or the respect of the interconnectedness of living and non-living things. Because if I'm going to a nurse, maybe I have cancer treatment. I don't know that I want nurses to be thinking about the ecology of rock formations while they're caring for me. So that was a bit of a concern to me as to what does this actually mean? How are they going to, there's also a call in the Code of Ethics to report people who are not following ethics. So this then begs the question, are nurses going to be reported for not advocating for climate change enough or for non-living things?
Yeah. That non-living things is what gets me. It feels sort of like a pagan or animist. Like I was joking about voodoo and whatnot, but really that's no joke. That's exactly the kind of thing they're talking about here. Let me just finish that line. You stopped me at a perfect point, because it's crazy that we care about non-living elements of nature. I just need, I don't know, I got a rash, I need some ointment, or I have a sore throat, I need cough medicine. I'm not interested in the health and well-being of rock formations. But here, 5.3.4, learning about Indigenous governance, knowledge, practices, and ways of knowing in the protection of land, air, water, and ice. Never seen ice put in a list before. Plants and animals. I mean, I feel like this wants to be some new age Bible replacement. I would trust an Indigenous, like a racially First Nations person, to give me a cough medicine. I would trust a white person, a black person, any race. It's the objective, scientifically proven meds I want. I'm not interested in Indigenous governance, which I don't even know if the nurse, association knows. This is, who approved this? And are people seriously, I don't know, maybe they're counting on no one reading it.
I did try to reach out to the Canadian Nurses Association. I did also try to reach out to some nurses' unions, and I was unsuccessful in that. I did manage to speak off the record to a nurse, and she explained to me that this is normal for nurses to be advocates for certain things. And I found that curious, because I agree that if you're a nurse, you want to be compassionate to many things. But what I find curious about this document, it seems to be saying that political activism is part of the moral code of a nurse. It's not saying you can do this in your own spare time, but that you must do this as part of your job. Like I said, there's a whole section on social justice, or advocating for social justice, or promoting social justice activism, rather. And it includes climate change. It includes reporting people for microaggressions. It includes a commitment to DEI, all of the things that you might think about when you think about promoting social justice. And it concerns me that that is now seen as a code of ethics for people in the medical professions.
I think of our friend, the nurse, Amy Ham, who had never had a complaint against her. By all reports of her colleagues, was an excellent nurse. And then one day she made a comment about J.K. Rowling, and it was simply, "I heart J.K. Rowling." It was a billboard out there in Vancouver. And she has been persecuted and prosecuted and convicted and drummed out of the profession precisely by nurses referring to codes of conduct like this. Again, touches on absolutely nothing she has to do. So I think it's this. I think it's, where the more corrupt the society, the more the laws. Or as Lavrenti Beria used to say, "Show me the man, I'll find you the crime." Here's what I mean by that, Melanie. I think this document makes everybody guilty, because everybody's guilty of something, because this is so vague and weird. Like you now have to, quote, "adopt a planetary health lens informed by Indigenous knowledge of the interconnectedness of people with the natural world." I don't know what that means. You have to be informed about the disproportionate impact that climate change and other environmental changes have on distinct populations, such as Indigenous communities, women, people with, Melanie, my theory is that this would convict anyone, because it's such a vague, meaningless stew of cliches. So it sits out there like a trap. And then anyone the official nurses want to get rid of, they just say, "Oh, we got 10 or 20 things that everyone has violated. So everyone's guilty. It's just who's prosecuted. Everyone's guilty. It's just who's ejected." I've never seen such a loosey-goosey mishmash as this, and none of it has anything to do with nursing.
Well, you mentioned Amy Ham, and within the social justice section, it does say that they have to refrain from acting in a way that would cause harm. But as we know, the causing harm is ill-defined. And so I think you would be right on that. And another section says it's a nurse's ethical duty to not engage in misinformation and disinformation, but also report on these things. But again, we've seen over time what is considered misinformation and disinformation, and how many nurses, during COVID, maybe were participating in that. Maybe that would be seen differently depending on how what side of the debate that you fall on. And so it does create a trap, especially when you have a duty to report on ethical violations.
I've studied the word misinformation and disinformation for a long time, and I have concluded that it has a very simple meaning. You don't have to get a fancy Oxford Dictionary definition. Misinformation and disinformation is simply what you call ideas you disagree with. It's a fancy fake, scholarly, pseudo-science way of saying, oh, that person has a different set of opinions. Instead of debating it or arguing it or reconciling it, I'm going to swallow it all up by saying that's disinformation motivated by malice. Of course, I don't have to debate disinformation. That's a pack of lies. Misinformation and disinformation is simply what you call someone else's ideas you don't like. And they might say the same about you. There's no real meaning to it other than thought crime. That's what it is.
No, I completely agree. I felt reading this document that it was these things were so loosely defined. I mean, they do provide a glossary, but it's kind of loosely defined. I mean, speaking of defining things, they even changed the meaning of family again. So we see another, redefinition of family, that because some people who happen to be gay, for example, or part of the LGBT community may have had difficulties with their own families at some point in their lives. And then the whole idea of family has to be redefined as in just anyone that's close to an individual. And these things do concern me. It does concern me that is being imposed upon professionals through these bodies. And it'd be curious to see if anyone brings any challenges forward to these sorts of things.
I just want to quote one paragraph from your essay in which you cite this new definition of the family. And again, what this has to do with nursing, I don't know. I think that a nurse would probably meet anyone of any race, any sexuality, and treat them like, I think that's part of the ethics of the medical profession, is you take a patient, you don't ask what their politics are, you don't ask about it. And yet the opposite is happening here. You're being forced to focus on that. Let me cite what you report. Family: any person who plays a significant role in an individual's life, including people not legally related to the individual. Well, that's just simply not true. That's just not true. Members of the family include parents, siblings, spouses, domestic partners, and both different sex and same-sex significant others. Again, I'm not sure exactly what they mean. The term domestic partners, blah, blah, blah. But I think the key here is they're basically saying it means anything, even if you have no legal tenure. And that actually can be, you can see some bad ideas that might stow away in there. Who gets to make end-of-life decisions? If someone's in a coma, who makes life or death decisions? Decisions about certain operations, if the person in question is incapacitated. To give that to someone who's simply an important part of your life, that is upending centuries of custom and tradition. This is crazy. Who wrote it?
Other than it was the Canadian Nurses Association, I couldn't tell you who wrote it. It does feel like it was written with some activists with the CNA in conjuncture with. But speaking of that family, further down, it talks about kin, right? So it does elaborate on, basically it does kind of mean just anybody who's close to the individual. But when I read it, I did also think, like you do, who is this actually, who do they mean? And what are the legal consequences or ramifications of expanding that definition? Maybe we're talking about minors, maybe we're talking about mature minors, for example, or like you say, end-of-life care, maybe who's signing the documents. And none of this is really discussed. And maybe they don't discuss it in a document like this code, but it certainly does raise a lot of questions. And I think if you're a nurse and you haven't read your code of ethics, I think you should go have a read and possibly post and tell us what you think about it.
Yeah. You know, one of the things we've been focused on over the last year is the new euphemism for doctor-assisted suicide called MAID, medical assistance in dying, which is every few years they come up with a new term because the other ones have been, well, blemished with what they're real. So they have to keep on throwing it off and adopting a new nickname till that one's lost its appeal as well. If you are allowing non-family members to make decisions, let me read that kinship thing you mentioned. Kinship, or the extended family network, are terms that are important to Indigenous peoples as they go beyond the traditional definition of family. Kinship systems help to maintain traditional ways of life, assure the care and responsibility for the elderly and young, and determine the sharing of work and the distribution of food. What are we talking about here again? But I think this is the MAID aspect. Oh, I'm not a family member. I have no legal standing here, but I'm part of the family network, you see. And according to the Nurses Guide, I help to assure the care of the elderly. And they call MAID care these days. I think that only trouble can come for vagueness. You know, there's a saying in the law that a contract can be void for vagueness, or that there's a variety of legal maxims about poorly drafted laws, poorly drafted contracts. They can be void because of the uncertainty. This builds uncertainty. No one knows what the heck it means because, frankly, it can mean whatever they want it to mean. And that is a useful tool for tyranny and totalitarianism. That is not a useful tool for nurses to read and say, okay, now I know what to do. This is terrible, and I'm so glad you wrote about it.
Well, I will say this, that you mentioned MAID. I was relieved to see that actually they do provide a mechanism for maybe nurses that have a moral objection to MAID. They're aware that some people don't agree with it, and they've created a system that you can effectively recuse yourself from the care. You just have to keep providing care until the point that you're replaced with somebody else. So there's a system in place to report that, okay, I'm not really comfortable with this, and you need to find someone else. But it doesn't seem that there's any kind of similar process for much of the other activist framings in this document. Like if you don't believe in Indigenous ways of knowing, there's no way out of that. Or if you don't believe in this concept of microaggressions or some of the theoretical framework around, say, critical race theory, for example, like you can't recuse yourself out of that. Right. That is seen as a moral duty, and that you must carry on doing that anyway to be a nurse. But at least with MAID, they have created a pathway for people to be able to say, well, I'm not comfortable with this.
I'm very glad you told me that. And that's of some relief to me. You know, we've seen cases recently of public officials being censured or suspended for not saying a land declaration, for not shaking the hands of a drag queen who was brought in to a workplace. So there are many conscientious objectors who would be opposed to a great variety of the political orders commanded here. And we saw how that happens. We saw that during the pandemic. The people who, for religious reasons, didn't want to get the shot, they were rode roughshod over. Well, I'm so glad you published this, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Melanie. And I hope when you have other exciting and concerning news like this, you'll bring it to us and we can talk about it with you to our viewers.
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
Right on. Our pleasure. There you have it. Melanie Bennet with True North and Juno News. Stay with us. More ahead.